So today we've got a unique crossover episode with two of the sharpest minds in the coach development space, Tyler and Mark from SAVI Basketball. Tyler was a guest on episode 217. Mark was a guest on episode 189. Mark's episode was actually called Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. Now, it's funny because of today's conversation, what we're talking about, which I'll explain in a second, but SAVI, they have an incredible YouTube channel and coaching community, and they're not just about basketball. Actually, they've helped a lot of our coaches in other sports, in lacrosse and soccer, volleyball, with their coaching. And they've come alongside me to help grow the TOC coach community, and they're providing what I think is a really critical third component of what we try to do there, which is helping coaches, not just as leaders, not just helping with their culture, but helping them become more effective coaches. And today they're joining us on the Coaching Culture Podcast for a two-part conversation. And this is part one. Now, here's the big question we're going to be digging into today. Does your coaching competency or coaching effectiveness, does it actually affect your culture? We've all heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But what happens when the coach themselves, their coaching becomes the ceiling? Like, can you truly build a high performance culture if you're not developing yourself as a coach? Tyler, Mark, and I are going to be challenging each other on this one. We talk about what it means to be believable as a coach, why hypocrisy kills culture from the top, and the specific areas where a lack of coaching effectiveness starts to silently erode everything you're trying to build. Now, this is part one. Part two will drop on the SAVI Basketball channel on Tuesday, March 17th. So you go find them. Subscribe now at SAVI-coaching on YouTube, because you're going to want to hear the second half of this conversation. Just a reminder, links are in the show notes. Let's get right into today's episode of the Coaching Culture Podcast. All right, just a reminder, the links are in the show notes. So let's get right into today's episode of the Coaching Culture Podcast, the podcast that is here to help you to become a better leader, build a better team culture, and become a better coach. All right, Tyler, Mark, you've both heard the phrase, the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And yet I've been thinking recently about how a coach's competency or incompetency can actually affect their culture. And I guess that's where I want to pose a question to you both today, is using your expertise through SAVI Coaching to come in to the Coaching Culture Podcast to provide some guidance for our listeners around coaching effectiveness. I mean, I remember years ago, Mark, I was out watching you coach. This is probably back in like 2018. And prior to that point, I thought I was a pretty good basketball coach. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not a very good coach, because you are on like a whole other level, dude. So I'll just throw it to you to kick off here. How do you start to answer this question? When does my lack of incompetency or my effectiveness as a coach start to become a problem for my culture?
And let me ask a question. Well, thank you for the compliment as well. Now, whenever you came to watch us practice, you shared 1,000 really good ideas that we implemented. So I think, I think you're speaking too highly of me there. But all right, when you say competency as a coach, are you talking like X's and O's, in-game practice planning, those type of things?
Yeah, I think we're talking X's and O's, the strategy, skill development, just when you think about coaching, like the art of coaching, and then the technical, tactical, depending on the sport. I mean, if you think about track and field, it could be, all the strategy there, as well as, the technical development.
Yeah. I think when I initially hear this question, my inclination is to say like, no, you don't have to be a great technical, tactical clinician, like that type of coach to build really good culture. But then the more I think about it, I actually think you do. I think if you lack competency as a coach, it's going to put a ceiling on your culture. Like I think you can have a really good foundation. You might be a coach that people like being around or like playing for. You might build a culture where players enjoy showing up to the gym. But I think that only gets you so far. Like I think that would be like a level one culture. It's just like, hey, we like being here. I think if you're going to really take your team to the next level, then they have to like being around each other, but they also have to like work hard and trust each other. And to take it a step further, they got to work hard, trust each other, and then hold each other accountable. And I think if you're not developing yourself or you're not competent as a coach, I would foresee it to be hard to get to like a level 2, level 3 culture outside of just, hey, we enjoy each other.
Tyler, what do you think? What comes first, the culture or the competency or the effectiveness as a coach?
This is so timely. So, culture eats strategy for breakfast, but bad coaching makes you want to throw up. Okay. I got a text yesterday from a Division 1 coach that listens to the hours. And recently on the hours, many of our listeners will remember this. We were talking about the importance of setting standards and holding high standards to have a thriving culture. And this Division 1 coach, who's a committed listener, he texts me probably every couple of weeks. Great feedback, ideas. He has to remain anonymous on this comment when he texted me. But he said, please talk about this. So this is perfect. He said, you spoke about high standards in culture and leadership. He said, it's all good stuff. He said, but I just keep thinking, no head coach can establish a culture or hold standards that he can't keep himself. If the coach is not believable, the culture will die. If the coach is not believable, the culture will die. So you can read all the books, you can do all the team building activities, you can put the signs up on the wall, you can have conversations. But if you individually are not a leader that people want to follow, if you don't inspire them by your personal habits of discipline, if you can't actually help players get better at their craft, if you are incompetent in your practice planning, you lose them. I walked into a gym last night with 5 new players, 8th and ninth grade boys. Didn't know it all. We all know how 8th and ninth grade boys operate. They're lazy, lackadaisical, think they know it all, and think they're really cool. Right? So immediately within 2 minutes, I went at the best player who was just going through the motions. And if he didn't see me dribble a basketball when I demonstrated a move, he wouldn't have listened to me. But just by me, a lifetime of training myself, dribbling a basketball with a level of flow and rhythm that he didn't have, he would do anything. I said, you run in and out. He started running. I said, you give high fives to your teammate. He did it. But if I was a crappy basketball player, I wouldn't have had that immediate buy in. I had a level of competency that demanded respect. If coaches don't have the level of competency that demand respect, it will be very hard, maybe impossible to implement culture. And the competency doesn't have to be skill in the sport, but a competency is like Ted Lasso had a level of competency, not a skill in soccer, but a level of competency, of articulation, of humor, of likability, of magnetism that demanded respect. So I think that is where a lot of coaches fall short is they just think, oh, I'm going to do a team building exercise and have a great culture. No, you have to be believable first.
So here's a thing that's coming up for me that I'm learning and I'm going to propose. If you are not working on your craft of coaching,
Yes.
the way that you teach, the X's and O's, all those things, if you aren't developing and getting better at that, then culture just becomes kumbaya. It just becomes this like, ooh, let's all get around here and feel good. And maybe some teams will be accept that, but most teams, the teams that I want to coach, will not accept that. And I think about a long time listener to the Coaching Culture podcast. I think he's a listener to the Hours podcast, coach in Idaho. His name's James Anderson. And he told me recently around a team that he took over on the men's side at the high school level. And the way that he got instant buy-in was actually the very first practice. People were like, oh, he's going to make me better.
Yeah.
Before that, they're like, oh, he's all about the culture and he's all kumbaya, but like, oh, he's going to make me better. And all of a sudden, players gave him respect. And I think what you shared, Tyler, is really, really powerful because culture to me is standards and relationships.
Hmm.
Those two things, high standards, high relationships, they drive performance and experience. And you make a great point. If we care about standards, are we actually working and getting better ourselves? We want our players to get better as players. Are we getting better at how we deliver practices, how we implement strategy, all those things?
Yeah. I mean, hypocrisy kills culture, especially from the top. And we see any organization. You see it in huge churches all the time. They fall apart when the lead pastor of the church goes and commits some heinous, act, and then all of a sudden everyone leaves the organization. It doesn't matter of all the great moments that they had in that organization, all the relationships that they built, how their life was changed, because the leader doesn't live up to the standard, everyone leaves. And I think that's what is just so essential. You cannot give away what you don't possess, and we can't demand from others what we are unwilling to supermodel 10x in ourselves. And I think that's where great culture starts. It really does start with leading ourselves, which is, everything that we do at COC, right? Is you got to be a better coach, you got to be a better leader, and then you will have a better culture. But you can't just start with better culture if you're not going to be a better coach and master your craft, and you're not going to develop qualities that people want to follow.
Yeah, Tyler, this reminds me of an episode we did where we did our bracket challenge
Yeah, yeah. Building the perfect coach.
coaching. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
coaching skills that you would have. I went back and I looked at our final four, and it was a relation like being relational, relationship building, being a good communicator, bringing high energy, and then having high standards. None of those, that beat out practice planning and system design and in-game coaching. But to JP's question is like, hey, what comes first? I think if you're a good communicator, if you have high energy, if you have high standards, well, that feeds the engine of your culture and it feeds the engine of like your actual X's and O's, your technical and tactical execution. You use those same skills, but to build kind of two different things. I know they're all related, right? And they all dovetail, but like, how are we a great communicator? How do we enforce standards? How do we bring high energy? Well, that should be the same amount of energy into building our culture and to building our systems on the court. And then, also like another way that as Tyler started talking about, like you have to have like some level of competency. If you flip the question of does incompetent or being incompetent, does that erode culture? I think yes, because y'all said it. I wrote it down. I think JP said like, can you make me better? That's
Mhm.
how you build trust, right? Is like, all right, one, do you care about me? That's the relationship part. Do you care about me as an athlete or a person before the athlete? And then second, as the athlete, can you, the coach, make me better? I think if it's yes and yes, then you have the foundation for like we can build a really good culture because I am competent as a coach.
So here's my question for you. I got two big questions. The first is people always ask me, JP, if I want to get good at building culture, like where do you start? Like what's the most important thing? So when you look at the art of coaching and the craft of coaching, there's a lot you could get better at, like how you player development, skill workouts. It could be X's and O's, systems implementation. There's so much practice design, planning and review, scout, film, right? There's so much where if a coach feels that, man, my coaching might be actually the barrier to the culture right now, where should a coach start to get better at?
Okay, I'll say this, and I don't think it's a perfect answer. Become great at what you're good at is where somebody should start. Become great at what you're good at. So much in sport, we're like, oh, we gotta, protect our weaknesses. We gotta improve our weaknesses. And I do think there's a place for that, but I wouldn't start there. I mean, when you think about any coach, there's one quality that stands out. They're probably good at other things, but there's one thing what are you known for, right? So I would start there. Like, what are you good at? Like, are you great at just bringing energy, right? Become great at that. Are you a gifted communicator? Become great at that. Are you a tactician? Become great at that. One of our, I think, mutual friends who I've learned a lot from, Bob Starkey, longtime coach in the women's college game, LSU. He is a great assistant coach, right? He's a great assistant coach, and his superpower, what he speaks on in every coaching clinic, is scouting. And he just loves scouting reports. Like, he has become the absolute best in the world at scouting reports. And because he's so good at scouting reports, he can go up to any player on any team or any coach anywhere and talk to them about anything, because wow, he's the best in the world at scouts. Right. So I think I would just start with, like, with your natural strengths, being great at what you're good at. If you're a great shooter in basketball, right? That's what's going to get you a scholarship or drafted. You're not all of a sudden going to be a rim protector. So become great at what you're good at is where it's starting I'm doing a lot of research on um, executive design, which basically it talks about how you learn anything is actually by learning other things, not by learning that thing. And so as you become great at any one thing, you will naturally become better at every other thing through executive function. So it's some really interesting research, and I believe it's true in coaching as well.
Mhm. That makes me think of when I went back coaching basketball for like 3, 4 months during COVID in 2020.
Mm,
I remember I was just like, I knew at that point, yeah, I'm good at actually delivering the practice. But when it comes to a lot of times the planning or the systems design, I was like,
mm,
no, call Mark. Right? Like
mm.
I was like, Mark, you gotta help me, man. So instantly he helped me with all of that stuff there. And man, I was so much more effective. Where do you go, Mark, to that question? Like when you in your consulting, where do you see maybe a coach struggling in their coaching? You're going, yeah, that actually is gonna pose a problem for the culture.
I think whenever they're not intentionally, I guess, building it, or they don't see the consequences of not investing in it, because so much of what our consulting becomes is things that are you wouldn't expect, right? I think whenever you think of basketball consultant, you think X's and O's, just like how I was able to help you. Obviously, you're an expert in building culture and establishing standards. So that's not really where I was supporting you. I was supporting you more in the X's and O's. I feel like in a normal coach to coach consulting relationship, they come for the X's and O's. And then when they don't necessarily get the results out of that, then we peel back the layers and it's like, well, my team doesn't talk. It's like, okay, well, what systems do we have in place for that? What standards have we created around communication? Well, I haven't done that. Okay, well, then that's where we need to go. You talk about where to start as a coach. If I was taking over a program, I would start with standards. I'd start by leading myself, like modeling the behaviors that I want my players to have, and then I would just start really small. Like, what's one standard that we can implement in our culture that's going to help us before we even get to the court. But then when we get to the court, it's going to amplify everything that we do.
That's a wrap on part one of this conversation. Now, if it got you thinking about how your own coaching effectiveness is shaping your team's culture, that's exactly the kind of work we do inside TOC Coach every single day. TOC Coach is a community Tyler, Mark, and I have built for coaches who are serious about developing themselves, not just their players. We work on the art and craft of coaching, leadership, and culture, and all the things that make you more believable, more effective as a coach. And if that's you, the link is in the show notes to join us there. Part two of this conversation will be live in the next few days on the SAVI Basketball YouTube channel. Just head on over to SAVI-coaching to hear us go deeper on what it actually looks like for a coach to get better, finding your blind spots, seeking membership, and using constraints to force your own growth. Share this episode with a coach who needs to hear it, and we'll see you next week.